Thank you for watching us on YouTube. But did you know that if you're on the go, you can get the full show as a podcast now? You can get our morning breakdown of the most important topics facing our country, news not being covered by the mainstream media, interviews with change-making progressives, and info on what you can actually do about all this. Search for The Damage Report on your favorite podcast app and subscribe so you know when new episodes are ready to go. Brett Kavanaugh's future on the Supreme Court seems a little bit shakier, which is a real shame this week as a result of all that's coming out from last week, where first we knew that there was this mysterious letter, then we heard it might have to do with sexual assault, then we got the details, and then the woman herself, Christine Blasi Ford, a professor at Palo Alto University, she has come out and talked about what actually happened. And I believe most directly as a result of that, we have had a ripple through all of the votes that were considered somewhat shaky on Kavanaugh, where now we might actually have a slight slowing down of the process. We might learn more about this woman's story. The attempts to destroy her credibility initially appear not to have worked, although that campaign continues. And so with that, I want to give a little bit more details directly from her as to what she says happened. This is her speaking with the Washington Post. She said, Kavanaugh physically pushed me into a bedroom as I was headed for a bathroom up a short stairwell from the living room. They locked the door and played loud music, precluding any successful attempt to yell for help. Kavanaugh was on top of me while laughing with Redacted, this second person that has not yet been named, although we do believe we know who it is, who periodically jumped onto Kavanaugh. They both laughed as Kavanaugh tried to disrobe me in their highly inebriated state. With Kavanaugh's hand over my mouth, I feared he may inadvertently kill me. From across the room, a very drunk Redacted said mixed words to Kavanaugh ranging from go for it to stop. It's a pretty big distinction between those two things. At one point when Redacted jumped onto the bed, the weight on me was substantial. The pile toppled and the two scrapped with each other. After a few attempts to get away, I was able to take this opportune moment to get up and run across to a hallway bathroom. I locked the bathroom door behind me. Both loudly stumbled down the stairwell, at which point other persons at the house were talking with them. I exited the bathroom, ran outside of the house, and went home. And so that is what we know now about what is alleged to have happened. We also know a little bit more about when she first started talking about this. She says that she didn't talk about it for many, many years after it happening and did not see Kavanaugh again. Although back in 2012, in some sort of therapy session with her husband, she did talk about the incident and did name Kavanaugh at that point. So huge developments.
Huge development.
What do you think about all that was breaking over the course of this weekend?
Right, so one, yes, Kavanaugh's already said this didn't happen, he wouldn't do this. I feel like I have to just say that. Also, what has been not fascinating, but I think harmful to me is that she was forced to come forward. She kind of, she came forward over the weekend, but she was forced to, and what she kind of talks about leading up to her basically being like, you know what, I may as well, bothers me. It bothers me that a reporter followed her to her home. It bothers me that a reporter was calling her coworkers because I feel like there should be a line. I've been there many of times, even like as a local news reporter, knocking on doors of a murder victim's family, and it's uncomfortable and it's awful and you wish you didn't have to do it, but there has to be a line. And I feel like showing up to the home of a woman who is allegedly a victim of sexual assault as a teenager, I feel like that crosses that line.
Yeah.
And thankfully, she came forward, but she didn't have to.
Yeah, and didn't want to initially at all.
Didn't want to, and that's her prerogative. And I'm bothered by that.
Yeah, and then, so the troubling thing is, so the initial information comes out. This is before we knew the details of her name, her story, and all of that. We knew a little bit about the story, sort of secondhand through Ronan Farrow. Then the GOP begins spinning up their combination attempt to shred her credibility, playing on the fact that she hadn't put her name forward. Well, she hasn't put her name forward, then how can we take it seriously? The opposite side of that game is as soon as she comes forward, they will then use any detail about her life to attempt to tell you that we shouldn't take it seriously.
Well, one could say that we have a precedent that it wouldn't be taken seriously because
they never take it seriously.
And we've had this exact same incident, almost a different situation, but a similar scenario. It's sexual harassment, not sexual assault necessarily, but we've seen it. And the accuser is sitting on the Supreme Court and will be for, until he doesn't want to.
That's true, yes, in similar situation with the White House.
Right.
Yeah, and then every part of this is so disingenuous. Them saying, well, why did she wait until right before the vote? Well, she didn't. She sent the letter back in July. So, but then when that further detail comes out, they don't update their view and think, oh, well, in that case, it's reasonable. No, then it's just on to another thing. The thing here is some people want to have a serious conversation and some people have an objective. Their objective is getting Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Everything else is just games being played around that. Considerations about whether this woman was actually sexually assaulted do not enter into it. There is no thought whatsoever about that. Eric Erickson's on Twitter talking about this being a Democrat conspiracy. The Daily Wire is saying, oh, we tracked down, because we know her name now, we tracked down, did you know that she had donated money to Friends of Bernie and one other Democratic group? And then some people will hear that and think, well, that's suspicious. First of all, it's not suspicious. Many people have donated to various groups.
It's fairly normal, yeah.
And what that guy didn't mention is the donations were between $5 and $30.
Right.
It could have literally been the $27 stereotypical donation to Bernie, but we're supposed to think that, oh, well then she's basically George Soros at this point. It's just about it's just tribalism. It is just tribalism. We want this guy. We don't care about learning the details of this attack. We don't care if they actually happened. But I do want to give some other updates. We had that letter, the suspiciously quickly put together 65 women speaking in support of him. Well, now we have another letter saying, we believe Dr. Blasi Ford and are grateful that she came forward to tell our story. This is a draft letter from alumni of Holton-Arms, a private girls' school in Bethesda. These are people who knew the two people involved in this story. They said it demands a thorough and independent investigation before the Senate can reasonably vote on Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to a lifetime seat on the nation's highest court. They also say that what was said about Ford is all too consistent with stories we heard and lived while attending Holton. Many of us are survivors ourselves. So not necessarily saying that they had experiences like this with him, but they had heard about people doing things like this. Now,
this is not out of the ordinary. And since the beginning of this year, more and more people realize this is not, unfortunately, this is not out of the ordinary. So of course it is a believable story. Yeah. None of us were there, but when it comes to someone being confirmed to become, to a lifetime appointment, as essentially the highest decision maker when it comes to the laws of this land, absolutely, it needs to be heard.
Yeah, in a number of ways more powerful than the president, and certainly with a longer term hold of power over the country. And look, this story by itself, this doesn't necessarily mean anything, but neither did the one that they came out before. The simple fact that you can find some women that he didn't sexually assault, what is that supposed to prove? It doesn't prove anything. But they believe that, because that's what always happens. Anyone who has ever been accused of sexual harassment or sexual assault is going to have some people that think that they're good people.
Right.
Okay, that's
absolutely.
what
You're
civilization's like.
Absolutely. People who have been convicted and admitted to murder have one or two people at least. I think what was fascinating about that, and it's so small, but I cannot name 65 boys that I went to high school with. Like it would take me a while. A lot of them are named Ryan, I remember that. But and I went to, I didn't go to an all-girls school, so it should be easier for me, but I don't know.
Yeah, and I get what they're trying to do. Look, if someone you know has been accused of something, you're gonna wanna stand up for them for the most part. That is simply what people do. But it has virtually nothing to do with whether or not they actually committed this act. Now, I just want to add one more wrinkle to this. And again, this doesn't necessarily prove anything, but it is interesting in terms of what we do know about Brett Kavanaugh and redacted from that time. There is a belief that the redacted person is Mark Judge. Now, both Kavanaugh and Judge have talked about their time in that period of their life. And Kavanaugh
Judge wrote a book, right?
Judge wrote a book, and we have a little excerpt from it. So Kavanaugh said in a 2014 speech to the Yale Federalist Society, an amusing story of a friend who got so drunk he fell and smashed a table. Mark Judge, in his yearbook, is treasurer of the Keg City Club, 100 kegs or bust. Now, neither of those things, again, saying that you're a hard drinker doesn't mean that you sexually assaulted anyone at all, but it plays in slightly to the story, and it also makes it, if you're saying, well, she didn't talk about this for years, her memory might be faulty. Okay, well, they were apparently hard binge drinkers at that time. Maybe their memory is a little bit faulty. We can all play these sorts of games. Thank you very much for watching this clip from The Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.